Hey, I'm Brandon with Cummins Fuel Tanks, and today we're installing a fuel tank on this 2024 Ram Crew Cab long bed. The tank part number is 7030313, and it is a 55-gallon replacement tank. Once you unbox your tank, you're going to want to make sure you have all the parts you need to do the install before you get going. You're going to want to make sure you have a warranty packet with an O-ring and a spare vent elbow in case the one on the tank gets broken, some rubber bushings, and you're going to want to make sure you have both straps rubber banded to the tank, as well as a top flange and 8 nuts. Before you install your tank, you're going to want to make sure that your fuel level on your existing tank is fairly low. This truck has just under a quarter tank. Once you have removed the fuel that you need to pull the tank out, you're going to start by undoing your vent hose and your fill hose that are located up here under the fender. Some people find it easier to pull the wheel well liner out of the truck. The long beds have a little bit more room, so I'm going to try to do it without pulling the wheel well liner. So next we need to undo the fuel line so we can drop the tank, as well as the electrical connector. The first fuel line we'll do is the fuel line with the blue clip right at the fuel filter water separator. We will also need to do the fuel line that is attached to the sending unit closest to the frame, as well as the electrical connector up on top. This fuel line has a safety clip, as well as a button that you need to press in order to pull the fuel line off. This button is kind of in an awkward spot, so a lot of times I'll take a mini screwdriver or a pry bar and use it to push the button while I pull the fuel line off. Next, you're going to want to support the tank. I find it easier oftentimes to remove the straps and lower the tank slightly in order to get to some of the fuel line connections and the electrical connector on the top of the tank. You do have a little bit of slack to lower the tank to get to those connections. So next we're going to be undoing the fuel line that's closest to the frame rail, as well as the electrical connector. To undo the electrical connector, there's a red lock that you will slide and then a button to push and you'll pull it off. There will also be a hose that is up here that you'll have to undo from a little T-fitting. All it is a vent that will be hooked up on the new tank. Don't forget to undo this def retainer. The def lines run along this tank. Don't forget to unclip that before you drop the tank so you don't kink the lines. There are also these little fuel line retainers. You're going to want to make sure you disconnect these so that when you drop the tank, it does not pinch a fuel line. As you lower the tank, make sure that you're watching for any fuel lines or electrical connectors that are caught, and guide the fill hose and the vent line down past the frame. Once your tank has been dropped, you're going to want to take this green clip, remove it from the sending unit, reinstall it into the fuel line so that when you go to reinstall the new tank, it clips in much easier. You're going to do that by prying up on these little legs gently. Spin it around. Pry up on the other one, and then you can pull it off and install it into the fuel line again. On the electrical connector, there is a red lock. Usually that is on the in position when it's up here, and you're going to take a little flathead or mini pry bar and you'll push it out towards the frame, and then there's a button. You will push that and slide off the connector off of the sending unit. Once you pull out your stock tank, you're going to set it next to your Titan tank, and you're going to ooh and ah at how much bigger it is. The next thing you're going to do is inspect the tank. Make sure nothing got in it during shipping, that kind of stuff. Then you're going to move your fill and vent hoses over to the new tank, as well as move your sending unit into the Titan tank. When you're pulling off these fill and vent hoses, make sure you keep them in the same orientation as they came off of the stock tank. Some of them have a little line so that you can keep those at the 12 o'clock position. This allows it to fill properly by orienting the hoses correctly. So on the old tank, you're going to knock off the sending unit lock ring, clean up the top and bottom surface of the sending unit so there's no dirt or debris. Once you've cleaned the sending unit, you're going to make sure you have the O-ring installed on our tank. Then move the sending unit from the stock tank into the Titan tank. When you put the sending unit in, make sure that your tab is lined up with the tab location marked on the tank. Then you're going to install your top ring and start snugging these down. Once you have your sending unit installed and your top ring in, you're going to snug all the nuts down, and then you're going to get a torque wrench and torque them. First, you're going to torque them to 20 foot-pounds in a star pattern. Then you're going to wait 15 minutes, and then you're going to torque it a second time. That second torquing is crucial to ensure proper sealing of the sending unit area. After you finish torquing it, look and make sure that every single stud has about 4 threads sticking out over the top of the nut. One thing I find helpful is to take a little bit of grease and lube the inside of both hoses. That makes it a lot easier to slip them on in a tight spot. Once you have the tank most of the way up into place, it is a good time to hook everything up. Once you hook up that rear vent, hook up your 2 fuel lines and your electrical connector, and then you're ready to lift the tank the rest of the way into place so you can hook up your fill hose and your vent line and put all your straps in. One thing to make sure when you're raising the tank up is you're going to want to grab these lines and feed them over the frame so that they don't get pinched. Now that the tank's all the way up in place, we're going to install the straps. I like to put a little bit of an outward bend on the front strap, and sometimes I put an inward bend on the rear strap. It helps it notch into the frame a little bit easier. You will also be installing a rubber bushing with these straps. It is a spacer. If your tank is tight without the rubber bushings, you do not need to install them. This is purely to adjust fit. If the stud does come out, it is okay. What you're gonna do is you grab a pair of vice grips, a vise, something like that. You're gonna hold on to the nut, and then on the top, there is a inverted Torx. And you can either use that, or if you don't have the proper socket, you can use a 1/4 inch socket or some vice grips. You can use any of those methods, and you're just gonna turn it out. Once you get the nut removed, you're going to reinstall this stud back into the truck. I always put a little bit of red Loctite on the threads that actually thread into the truck. That way, if the tank ever needs to be removed, this stud will stay in place. Now that you got your tank in place, the last thing you need to do is to hook up the vent hose and the fill hose, tighten those hose clamps, and then fill it up. Once you finish your vent and fill hoses, go through a checklist to make sure that you've completed everything. Make sure that your fuel lines are on, your electrical connector, your hose clamps are tight, and that your straps are tight. Then you're able to go and fill it and enjoy the extended range of a Titan fuel tank.